Perfect. And I would say, let's kick it off. A very warm welcome to today's panel discussion. Let's very quickly start with the housekeeping. First things first, this will be recorded. This is live. We will share it afterwards because I think there will be a couple of quite interesting information for all of you. You can ask questions during the webinar, but especially there will be at the end a Q&A section where we will try to answer all the questions that you potentially have. And a big question after the housekeeping is obviously, why are we here? What are we discussing? And we are seeing quite big changes currently in the world of data protection, which are also reflecting the online marketing world. We saw it in 2018, there was the GDPR. We saw LGPD in Brazil, for example, or CCPA in California, PAPL in China, and so on and so on and so on. And right now, there was quite a new thing, which many companies are currently talking and discussing about, and it's called the Digital Markets Act. And the Digital Markets Act, DMA, could fundamentally change the way how we interact with our users. Why? Because it provides specific rule sets for gatekeepers like Google, Apple, Amazon, ByteDance, the mother of TikTok. So long story short, the world of consent and data management is changing. And while it's changing, basically there is a big question in the room, which is your business ready to adapt to consent-based marketing, and can you meet the requirements from the gatekeepers to be DMA ready? And I know compliance here and there sounds boring, but don't worry. This discussion isn't just about compliance. We will also talk about many opportunities which are coming from compliance. So we will explore practical, effective strategies to not only comply with the new regulations, but also to leverage your consent-driven setup in this new landscape changes. Okay, that was quite a long intro. I will very quickly talk about the agenda for today, which is what is basically the Digital Markets Act, how will it impact our online marketing and our data strategy, and what should companies do right now, and then in the end, a question and an answer section. And the most important thing is who will I discuss with today. The first person from eDialog in Vienna, Sandra Wojciechowska. I hope that was right. I think we had our first call in, I think it was 2018 or beginning of 2019 somehow. And since then, also eDialog was one of the first Usercentrics partners. So very happy that you're here. Sandra is leading as head of content management at eDialog international brands. So also very much on the enterprise basis, on the implementation of privacy-based data strategy. So very in line on what we will talk about today. And not just that, she's also the data protection officer of the eDialog group and has therefore obviously a huge variety of experience on the data protection and the marketing performance side. So very happy that you're here, Sandra. Lucas Gilbert, the next one in our small round. He joined Usercentrics years ago. I think it was 3 years ago, working as a customer success executive. So he really knows the enterprise businesses, their challenges on the data side, on the compliance side, the implementation side, and very much specifically to our Usercentrics product. So also he is quite aware on the data protection side, but also on the marketing performance side. And last but not least, Richard. I think we regularly meet in these kind of setups. Richard is our Cookiebot product master. He started to work for Cookiebot around 4 years ago, and since then learned a lot, especially from a various amount of tickets that he was working on. And he used to be the technical support lead Now he's a senior technical support specialist because he wanted to go a little bit deeper into this nerdy area. And I have the impression that you can truly feel that in the way he talks and in the way he provides us with answers. So long story short, happy that you are all here. But let's dive deep into the area, and I would start with you, Sandra, and the Digital Markets Act. What is it? Can you explain the key elements and the primary objectives, please?
Yes, thank you. And good afternoon to all of you. Thank you that I can be here. And yeah, the Digital Markets Act, actually, so in December 2020, the European Commission has already proposed a set of rules for online platforms in the EU. So those rule sets were on the one hand the Digital Services Act and on the other hand the Digital Markets Act that we're discussing today. And the aim of those acts is basically to address the negative consequences that arise from certain behaviors by online platforms. And those are defined by the European Commission as so-called, as the European Commission calls them, gatekeepers. These are 6 gatekeepers that, for example, are Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, ByteDance, Meta, and Microsoft. And those need to provide and need to ensure fair competition amongst other players in the market. So basically the DMA specifically is rooted in the field of competition law and aims to protect consumers as well as mentioned the competitiveness on the market so that those players are not keeping small businesses from doing their from growing and enlarging their expansions and so far and so forth. And the aim is to really have a healthy balance and a healthy competition in the EU market.
Yeah, basically balancing a lot in the European market. Thanks a lot for the overview here, Lucas. Since you worked a couple of years now for Usercentrics, and since 2018 we basically saw the GDPR. What is the differentiation between the kind of old GDPR and the new Digital Markets Act that we are seeing?
Yeah, first of all, good afternoon to all the listeners. So the basically the DMA can be considered as kind of an add-on to GDPR, but there is of course one fundamental difference with the DMA compared to the GDPR, and that's exactly what Sarah just mentioned, that the DMA basically challenges the online tech giants. So it makes them responsible to enable the fair and compliance conditions on the market. So that is literally, in a nutshell, the basic difference.
Okay, perfect. The goals of the DMA, as you both the fair competition, enhancing consumer choices, talking about transparency, etc. Sandra, the DMA is one current legislation, which is, as you also mentioned, especially going after the gatekeepers. But are we seeing right now also similar or different regulations which are coming up, which are close to the Digital Markets Act?
Yes, as I mentioned, there is also in this whole package, there is also the Digital Services Act, which is aiming towards big online platforms and social media platforms, for example, as we know them. So we are currently focusing on, besides the DMA, also the DSA, but also what is coming up next is also the AI Act, which is already and there that we need to focus on, and as well as we need to also bear in mind the bigger picture that we are also facing a whole changing ecosystem due to the phase out of the third-party cookies. So it's not only the regulations that we are now focusing on, everything that is coming up, but also the change in the ecosystem, the whole shift that we feel and see for so many years now, basically towards privacy and towards data protection, transparency, and facing those needs of consumers is what we really need to be aware of, and that we need to take into consideration even more and more.
Yes, makes sense. Makes sense. In general, from the digital market perspective, we're talking about 6 companies, the designated gatekeepers. Richard, is it just the 6 companies that are impacted by that, or is there someone else in the market who might be affected or impacted?
Well, yeah, generally it is these 6 big players, but anyone that works with their technologies is of course also affected. What DMA also essentially does is, instead of giving these bigger companies a pass, so they could basically just do whatever you want, and then the end user had to somehow make that work. Had to somehow figure out how they could legally use their products without the one that provides these services actually had to worry about it. And that's now flipped on its head. But it also means that, let's say you serve ads from Google, just the first one that popped in my head. Then before it was your responsibility to make sure that it happened legally, and Google could just sit back and just ignore that. But now, because Google is being held responsible, they're gonna require you to do it in a compliant way. So the way that works is that they rely on signals, and we know at least of 2 methods they use for that. But they require a signal being sent that conveys your consent choices to that platform, and if they don't get that, it will simply not provide their service. So if you are a publisher and you rely on ad revenue, and you don't have your affairs in order, then you could see quite a significant impact in your ad revenue, because it just won't be served.
Makes sense. Makes sense. You mentioned quite an interesting point right there, which is basically that is what we're used to from the GDPR, basically, is that companies are responsible that consent is there. And this is changing now to say, well, it's not just the company which is responsible to get the consent, but it's also the gatekeeper behind it. Richard, where does it count? Where is it effective? Where does the Digital Markets Act is basically?
Well, the Digital Market Act specifically only applies to EU, and then basically everyone outside the EU can cheer and be like, at least that's not me. But we've seen this before. I mean, GDPR was ahead of the other legislations, and then within a few short years, it has been. I mean, most Western countries now have privacy legislations. I mean, it's really taking off, and I expect to see something like that happening with DMA as well. That, like, yes, right now it's just the EU, but I wouldn't be surprised that in 5 years, then the entirety of North America will be affected. Asia, the countries that are technologically advanced will adopt similar legislation, especially if it's a success here, which I expect it will be.
Could be, yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, what we've also seen, so also there was quite an interesting webinar last week, the 27th of November, by Google, and also there one big slide or one big point was basically for companies to say, well, whenever you're having traffic with users inside of the European Union, you will be affected by the Digital Markets Act. Lucas, in our business, there are publishers and advertisers. Are they differently affected by the Digital Markets Act?
Yeah, not in terms of different effects on the different businesses, but of course it's also kind of a bit depending on the tech stack, and obviously the advertising use case. For, like, to give it an easy example, let's just focus on the publishers. So for publishers, for example, they need to comply most likely with the Transparency Consent Framework 2.2, which is a certified CMP solution to comply actually with the IAB framework policies to ensure a convenient operation of the publisher's business. For example, maximizing ad revenues, or like doing programmatic advertising on site and all that stuff. However, both use cases basically differ in the consent signaling. We will also dive into that later in the demo, where we will just like see on, okay, there's on the one hand side, there's TCF signaling, but on the other hand side, there's like even more. And of course, like both products, Usercentrics and Cookiebot, offer these solutions to actually comply with all different regulations and with all different use cases that might come up on the customer side.
So, long story short, so there is a new thing, which is the DMA. It impacts basically every company in the online world which has users in the European Economic Area. Long story short, Sandra, why is it important for marketers to get ready for DMA?
I think Richard has already mentioned it quite frankly, that this will have a major impact on the way we as marketers use the services that those companies provide. So we really need to be aware of the changes that we need to face right now. For, as Richard mentioned, for example, taking Google services into account. Until now, companies that were using Google services had to obtain the consent as we know it, right? Now with the whole discussion with the DMA, I feel that companies and marketers have the feeling that the responsibility is being now also shifted towards those big players, forgetting that they have to adapt and have to also make changes in their, for example, setup to also comply with the changes that this brings to them. So what I think is the most important part is that it's not just the big players now that are taken into account here and that need to adapt to the changes of the DMA, but also all companies that use those services that they are providing. So this is, I feel like, the most important fact that sometimes I feel falls under the radar here. So this is what I wanted to just stretch the point here. So basically, the thing that we need to obtain now whilst using the services of those companies is to ensure first and foremost something that we already know and something that we are doing for years now is to really obtain the consent, because one of the key points of the whole DMA is that those companies need to provide that they are getting the consent of the users that are using the services, right? So we really need to make sure that those signals are being provided to those service providers, and by also setting up our systems as companies. So when I'm using, for example, the ad stack from Google or Google services, I really need to make sure that I'm obtaining consent and that those signals are being provided then to the provider, Google in this case. But let's not forget that this is just one of the designated, let's say, companies or providers, so that the signals are being also provided further, and that those companies can then show that this consent is obtained and that they can provide the services as we're used to. So this is just an additional step, but the key point is that there need to be changes made in the setup, for example. So if I'm a company that thought that until now I'm just a small player, I can, for example, have a self-built solution, but not really have a focus on content management on my website, and this changes now. So we really feel also in discussions with our clients that sometimes those projects and around content management are being given to, for example, marketers or IT specialists, forgetting to be provided enough resources to really set up those projects in a professional manner, like with a strategy behind it, with resources, with platforms and solutions that are really professional and most of all also future proof. So I really feel that the first step is to really focus on the solution that is now on your side, on the marketer's side, and see whether this is a future-proof solution, whether this is, for example, solution that can obtain those signals and provide them, and that everything is firing in a rightly manner. And also preparing for the next acts and regulations that are coming up. As we've mentioned before, there is a lot coming. So I really feel that this is just another step and another showcase that we really need to focus on this point, and that it is an enabling tool and and license to operate for any further services that we need or that we are using on our daily basis.
Yes. I think this is also something that was made clear in the webinar that I mentioned previously. I think it was one of the first slides of the Google webinar where it was mentioned consented data fuels AI in the future. Something around that was the title. So consented data will somehow be the future, and consent is something that we should make sure about. Sandra, would you say we can already somehow foresee the implications if someone will have a delay there, or if someone will not well go after the DMA regulations and ignore everything what is currently discussed about?
Yeah, so as I said, failing to comply is not only risky for those, let's call them, as the European Commission calls them, gatekeepers, but
Yes.
essentially they are the big companies on the market, but there are also risks for third parties that are using the services, as I mentioned. Like, so every smaller company that is using services of those companies, and the implications might be, as Richard also put it out there, frankly, we can't use the services as we used to. So we have loss of data, we have implications on our audience management, also conversion tracking, but this might also have an impact on the revenue, of course, because this is what we do, right? So basically, and what I really found very, very true is a quote from Donna Draw, actually your CEO. She stated that no consent, no revenue, as well as you've mentioned it right now. So this is really an implication, and just shows that this whole discussion and this whole way of obtaining, and let's don't forget the user's consent to use data to then act upon that. And so these are the implications that we are now seeing, and I really believe that this should be a bit of a wake-up call for all companies, and that are not providing their specialists and their teams the right resources in this regard. So this is really something that should be in the mindset of every company that is using data and that is using the services from those companies that we are discussing. And so I really feel that this won't change. And this is just another regulation that is really undermining this fact.
So you would say early preparation for the Digital Markets Act is one of the key competitive advantages.
Well, the thing is that, sorry.
Yeah,
I think that early preparation is a bit of a, the fact is that the timeline is quite tense here already. So basically, those companies need to provide until March that they are getting the consent signals in a way. So actually, it's already very late to do something about that, but not too late. So it's I guess it's a good point now to get to really check what needs to be done. Also to connect with professionals and consultants that can lead the way, guide through the processes, and also provide the solutions that are needed to provide it from a technical point of view. So I really feel that now's the time, because in a few months it's too late, and we of course don't know what will happen then.
Yes.
This is just something that we can state from today's point of view, right? What could happen, and the implications I've told are also something that we think might happen from today's point of view. I think this is also very important to state.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Let's have a look a bit more into the world of the CMPs here. Lucas, what would you say would be now for our listeners the first steps that they could take to ensure compliance, since the deadlines are there very, very soon?
Yeah, so first of all our listeners joined the webinar, and this is a great first step, right? Because obviously you're taking this topic serious. That was just arising, and Sandra told it's really early in terms of, if you take into consideration that GDPR was already launched back in 2018, so it's really just like 5 minutes before 12, but it's still not too late. What is important is, of course, like becoming familiar with the DMA and to understand what it means and actually how it does impact your business, right? So that's the most important. And obviously, so take the chance and use a market-leading CMP solution like Cookiebot or Usercentrics that can help you to easily comply with all these regulations coming up. So not only GDPR or CCPA or TCF, everything that basically comes up also with these Digital Markets Act. And so just to easily understand your business and to figure out on how you can pass the consent to these service providers. So is it either through TCF, or is it maybe you make use of the Google consent mode, right? So if you're an advertiser, for example, or is it a combination of both? So what we also suggest is consult your contact person. You might also receive certain level of information from the vendors themselves. So like from the gatekeepers you're working with. So for example, Google or Facebook or whatever. So just keep an ear on that and listen to the market, and of course, like if you're having doubts, if you're having questions, just reach out to us. We see ourselves also as a trusted advisor for you.
Yeah, Richard, from an kind of automation process here, or from the role of automated consent solutions in complying with the DMA, why are the essentials there?
I think I'd like to use a little analogy there, because it's there's a lot of laws and rules you have to sort of follow, and if you would have to do that manually, that would become a real headache. So imagine if I want to buy a car, and I myself would have to figure out, okay, how many lumens does my headlights need to emit, and what kind of what kind of Kelvin degrees, and what kind of angles, and what kind of filters are supposed to be in my car, and the seatbelt. If I actually had to do all these things myself and specify them at the time I purchase a car, I would probably not be able to obey all the rules. So the car manufacturer does that for me. He makes sure that headlights are in order, my seatbelt is in order, and it's the same with a good consent management system. We make sure that all these little boxes are ticked. Of course, you still get to customize it, to suit your needs, but we make sure that it's easy to do. Like in both our solutions, in Usercentrics and Cookiebot, a lot of signals are being sent without you having to do anything at all. They will communicate that to well, out into the ether, actually. It just assumes that there's someone listening and, hey, here's consent signals. And then that can be picked up. That also future-proofs it, because right now we've been talking a lot about Google, but that's also because that's the one of those 6 that has actually shown most initiative, because with the other players, either they're sort of like in a waiting pattern, or they don't seem to really know what to do about it. We don't really know. But if there are standards, and Lucas has mentioned TCF, that is a well-established standard, but specifically for publishers. And then Google created a second mechanism, which is called consent mode, which is basically a standardized way of taking what somebody entered on the banner, and then translate that to a language that the platform understands. And in this case, that's in the consent mode case, that's Google Tag Manager. But technically anyone could take that data and be like, okay, so you're okay with ads or analytical data, but you prefer not to have the personal stuff out there. So it's really important that this happens by itself, that you don't as an end user have to think about, okay, what legislations am I obeying here, and what platforms am I talking to? That has to sort of like be fixed for you, both from a convenience point of view, but also to make it feasible, because it is complicated, and for most people, consent is not the sexiest subject anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the metaphor with the car. Somehow it makes sense. It's a very complex topic in general. We already saw it with the GDPR. Now we are seeing it with the DMA, the DSA. Sandra also mentioned the AI Act, which will come at one day. So there are a lot of things to take a look into. Lucas, what are the key features to look for in an automated consent management platform if we want to achieve this DMA compliance?
Yeah, so I would basically focus on 2 different, and we mentioned them quite often in that call. But on the one hand side, we are talking about TCF, which basically targets the publisher's business, so such as on-site monetization, programmatic advertising, somehow, let's call it highly automated advertising funnel, right? And so that is really just like an introduced framework by the IAB, which is based on partners, features, and purpose, really standardized, and just like it's possible to have it with both products, so either Cookiebot or Usercentrics. And we have on the other hand side the Google consent mode, which is a different way and also standardized framework, but it's out of scope of the transparency consent framework, but it's somehow consent signaling based on storage type. So it's a different approach. And both products provide the tools you need to do a proper signaling, whether a service is allowed or not to load, or like to be fired. And really, so the distinction between both products is that the one focuses on cookies and their purposes, whereas the other focuses on the services, or like when we're talking about different purposes within the TCF framework. So in a nutshell, they both products achieve the same goals and can cover the same needs of in terms of legal requirements, but taking different approaches. So not like both products itself, but also the different frameworks, right? So it's just important to understand how they're working. And basically it is all about that signaling, right? Passing the consent signal to the respective vendors or to the respective technologies.
Oh, perfect. Good, yeah, that was quite a lot of theory. I would actually say, let's have a look into some action. Lucas, would you be so kind and show us some demonstration here, please?
Yes, of course. So I hope everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
Awesome. So I will just like really dive you through the sign up process, which is the same for Usercentrics or for Cookiebot, either way. And we are just going to create a company and yeah, we'll then check on how it does actually look like. And I will show you that we can focus on different frameworks. So that's basically, and also to show you how easy it is to set this up. Okay, there was an issue, but no worries on that. So now we are in the company, and here you can set up as many different CMP configurations as you would need. You can also set up different user management, etc. What's important, because we were talking about different frameworks, right? So we were talking about GDPR, we mentioned CCPA somehow, even though this is not relevant today. We were talking about the transparency consent framework. So you can choose from different frameworks that are predefined. Let's focus within Usercentrics on the TCF. I can just create that for testing purposes. And we can see that we now have basically set up a CMP for TCF. In terms of product setup, it's really easy to just like go through the global vendor list settings in order to select the different vendors that you would like to work with. So for example, let's choose Google advertising products. Let's select Criteo and some other random, doesn't matter. So you can easily select them. If you're in that framework, you basically know, like, especially from your marketers, etc., what vendors you're working with. Of course, you will be also able to set publisher restrictions on consent only, for example, if that is relevant for you. We also have the option to scan the website. I will not dive into that right now. And we can also add other services that are not coming from the framework, such as if you're using a Google Tag Manager, for example, I can just add it here from the database and add it there. So it's like pretty easy, just plug and play. You have different appearance and styling options within the CMP. You can change the brand color, etc. So how the button should look like, etc., etc. Of course, we're having also an analytics part within Usercentrics in order to focus on the performance of the CMP itself. So like, how does it attract your users? How do they interact? Do they interact or not? Do they accept, etc., etc., to get a better understanding on that? And of course, in the end, it comes to implementation. You can either implement it natively via JavaScript, or you can also go with our Google Tag Manager container, which is pretty easy. We got a predefined tag that you could choose from the template gallery. Let's just show it to you here and just add it to workspace and then follow the respective instructions. So that's it in a nutshell. It's pretty easy to set this up, to get like DMA ready within just a few minutes. And yeah, that's basically it for Usercentrics.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Again, for the listeners, if you just started to watch this during the demonstration, again, it's important to know that was TCF. TCF is a framework for publishers, and it is the way to demonstrate DMA compliance from a publisher perspective. Thank you so much, Lucas. Very, very helpful to see it also live. Richard, would you be so kind and show us something from the Cookiebot side, please?
Yes. If Lucas can stop sharing his screen, I can take over from there. Thank you. So here we go. Now, I am starting with a completely empty container, and I'm going to focus a lot on consent mode and how that works. So what I like doing first is enabling the consent overview, which is sort of, it's not really hidden, but it's not very obvious. So you go to admin, container settings, and then there's, I already have it enabled because I play a lot with this, but here you basically just enable the consent overview, and that gives you some special options, which I will show you right now. If you go to tags, you will notice that you have a small shield icon here, which is the consent overview. So now I just have these two tags up front, and right now I don't know anything about them consent-wise. But if I click the little shield logo, then I can see, okay, Google Analytics has something called built-in consent, and basically Google by default ensures that its tags understands consent. So when it receives it from well, in this case Cookiebot, but also from Usercentrics and probably some competing products, it knows how to behave, what data it can and cannot use, what kind of data storage it can use. But as you can see, Hotjar here has nothing. So it has no idea if it's allowed to run or not, and by default it will run then. And well, you know, Hotjar is not one of the bigger players, but imagine this was Amazon or Microsoft, and they would simply deny service because there's no consent. So to fix that, we press the Get Started button, pick one of the two options, Cookiebot, of course, add it to the workspace. Should be there now then. Is it? Let's see. There it is. Okay. Then now I can add a new tag, Cookiebot, as a custom tag. Now, by default, it has consent mode enabled. You can, of course, turn it off, but for the purpose of this demo, that would be silly, so I'll just keep it on. As a side note, enabling TCF is also just checking a box and boom, it's done. You can just choose a version. Always choose the latest, of course. But so this is my tag. Now it already has TCF enabled. I need to put in a ID, which I just happen to have under in my clipboard. And I need to make sure that it loads as consent initialization all pages. Now, the reason for that is that all triggers are done in a sequence. It starts first with consent initialization, then initialization, and then all pages. So to make sure that we know the tags are allowed to load, we must use this one. So I'll just give it a name. Oh. And basically, that is already it in terms of having Cookiebot installed and receiving consent signals. And now, of course, we need to teach that Hotjar tag, which we could see doesn't understand consent yet. We need to teach it how to interpret consent. So we go to the tag itself, to advanced settings, all the way to the bottom, consent settings. Right now, it's not set, but we're going to require additional consent. And then we can choose one of the storage types it knows. Now it's teasing me. Well, differently. You have ad storage, which is the appropriate one. You of course have analytics, functionality, personalization, and security. We'll go for ads because that's what we want here. And now we need to make sure that it because you don't want to lose your first page view. If you let's say you land on a page and the banner pops up, in the background, tags are being evaluated and fired. But if we don't know what consent is right now, then the tag will fail because it will just check, do I have ad storage permission? I don't know, so no. So we need to make sure that it does this after we know consent. So what we do is we delete this and we make a new custom trigger that we can reuse every time. And we call that cookie consent update. This event is, I need to spell this correctly. This event is sent by Cookiebot every time it consent changes or is submitted. So I'll just update. So now we have that assigned. And now if we go to the consent overview, you can see that it requires ad storage. So this tag will only fire if the customer or the end user has decided, yes, I'm okay with ads being served. And of course, this will only happen when consent is actually no. That's why we made the custom trigger. And for Google tags, you don't have to do anything at all. It's out of the box. It just works. So this is all it took. Get Cookiebot, make yourself a consent trigger, and that's it. If I now submit it, well, it won't go anywhere because this is a test container. But technically, my website would now only fire Hotjar if I have consent, and it would only use personal information and access browser storage if consent was given. That's all there is to it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. That was a lot of information in the last minutes, especially what you two were showing here. And we also have a question regarding exactly that. First thing is, obviously, we will share the recording afterwards, but also the about the instructions. Are there any restrictions, documentations, and where can the listeners find them?
Yeah, so basically, we provide our documentation under docs at usercentrics.com, and there's like all the information. Most likely, so if you're looking for something specific, it might be worth like reaching out your personal customer success executive or our support or whatever, or also browsing our support knowledge base. But if you are specifically interested in TCF 2.0, 2.2, I could also pass it into the chat. So that's an issue, if that is what you were asking for.
Yes, perfect. Richard, from your side, quite similar, I would think.
Yeah, we have a lot of documentation on this on support.cookiebot.com. You can just look search for the word consent mode or TCF or IEP, and you will get the related articles about implementation and configuration and questions. We every time we get a lot of questions about something, my rule of thumb is if I get 5 times the same question, then I make documentation, because then apparently it's something people need. So there's a ton of things there. If it's still something you don't understand, then you can just write support@cookiebot.com. You probably won't get me, but you will get one of my colleagues. And if it gets really complicated, then I will still get it, and then we will connect there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think, like, potentially, to be honest, there might be a lot of follow-ups, a lot of more information. Yes, the deadlines will be quite recent. But to be honest, also from the gatekeeper side, from the consent side, from the whole market, this is a new thing. I think when the first updates are there, when the first experiences are there in the market, when the things are integrated, and potentially we will also give you some follow-up, some advices, some best cases when customers implement the newest updates that we see in the market. And I think the most important thing is that we're here for you, that we support you. And since most of the questions are tackling where do we find more information, where's the instructions, where are we getting the recording, I think this already shows quite a significant development, basically, that we are in the beginning, that new information is quite valuable. And so thanks for the questions. Of course, we will also send you some information about this. Anna, could you also share the QR codes here where you get more information? That is something where you for sure get some more information. And now to our panelists, maybe we start with Sandra. Are there any last words that you would like to share to the audience?
Yes, thank you. I think the most important part is that everyone that is facing now those changes and is asking, like, where should I start? I think the most important thing is you're not alone. I think we are all in this, famous words, but there are partners, there are consultants that can guide through the processes and through all the changes that are coming up right now. So I would really urge to find partners you trust that really consult and guide you through the processes, and also a solution partner. I think the most important part is to really see the benefit of corporations like that for the future, and not forgetting the bigger picture. So the DMA is one part, but we will face more regulations. I don't think that there will be less in the future. So really focusing and on this topic right now, and also facilitating resources in this field is, I think, key.
Thank you so much. Lucas or Richard wants to start? Richard, yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, something I'd like to remind everyone of when it comes to DMA, that yeah, our first instinct is probably like, oh God, another regulation, another thing we have to sort of like mind. But actually, this one really benefits us, because before, if you got consent wrong on your website, and a data legislator would come knocking on your door, you would risk hefty fines. Now the worst thing that can happen to you is that Google or one of the others, like ByteDance, Amazon, Apple, that they basically deny you service. So it's a low cost thing. It doesn't, well, low cost. It doesn't hurt as much, and at least there's no criminal repercussions. So you of course you're differently incentivized, but there's less to fear. But because you now get these friendly warnings, and much sooner, than you don't risk as much as getting as before, as to get a data legislator suddenly knocking on your door, which nobody wants. Also, like Sandra also mentioned, like this is something you should really start taking serious already now. Even if you think it doesn't affect you right now, it will very soon. And this is only going in one direction. This will spread to yeah, like I said, it always starts in Europe, then it goes to North America, and then it goes to Asia and Africa, and before you know it, it's a global thing. So you might as well be ahead of the times. And it's also, people forget this, but it's a good way of sort of like showing your customer, like, I care. I'm not just stealing your data. I actually really care whether or not you voluntarily want to share your data. So see this as an opportunity, not so much as another stick you're going to be beaten with. That's what I would like to say.
Yes, thank you very much. And Lucas.
Yeah, so my key takeaway is actually consider this whole topic as an opportunity. And as Richard mentioned, so put the user in the focus, and like let them know that you care, and not only you care because you're obligated to, but really just like take it serious. And of course, I can also second what Sandra said. So take the opportunities. Look for partners that can consult, that can support you with that. That's like those I told it earlier in the call, that are trusted advisors, right? So some parties that you actually trust. And of course, don't miss any updates whenever there's any new newsletter or any other new news, because obviously market and legislations are evolving. But we are here for you, and we will sort this out together with you, and we'll support you. That's my key takeaway for today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of you for the participation. So it truly was a pleasure today discussing with you, getting some insights on the DMA topic. Specifically for the audience out there, the deadlines will be soon, at the latest at Q1 24, so March 24. From the advertiser perspective, there's one interesting deadline, which is the 16th of January for Google, for their publisher products, that you should keep in mind. But in general, we are here for you. You get the information. You can book a meeting with us. If you have more information, you can also book a meeting with eDialog, our very well-known partner, especially in Austria. So it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. And for the audience, have a nice afternoon, morning, night, wherever you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.